deaths here in the United States has just crossed 100,000. That is 100,000 men, women, children, mothers, fathers, sons, daughters, grandparents. 100,000 plus gone. As we remember all those who have been lost, there are so many tough questions Americans should still be asking about what could have been done and what still needs to be done right now to save lives. And behind tonight's heartbreaking number, there are more than 100,000 people with names and stories. We certainly can't share them all with you right now, but here are just a few. Valentina Blackhorse was a member of the Navajo Nation. She won several pageants, including Miss Western Navajo. As the pandemic swept through her reservation, she warned others to stay home, wash their hands, and wear masks. She died one day after testing positive for coronavirus. She was 28. Wilson Roosevelt German worked at the White House under 11 U.S. presidents. He started as a cleaner during the Eisenhower administration. He was promoted to butler under President Kennedy, a move his granddaughter says was orchestrated by then First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy. In all, he served more than 50 years, ending with President Obama. 42-year-old Sunday Rutter was in remission from breast cancer when she became ill with the coronavirus. Her 6 children said their last words to her through a walkie-talkie placed at her bedside. Rutter had been a single mother since her husband's death in 2012. Her 6 children, aged 13 to 24, now left without a father or a mother. Leslie Leake, her daughter Eniki, and her son John Leake Jr. all died in the span of 1 month. Surviving daughter Shante says her mother always helped others, despite being on a fixed income herself. She says her sister was the social butterfly of the family, and her brother John was the chef who cooked at every family gathering. Ellis Marsalis Jr. was a New Orleans jazz legend and the patriarch of the Marsalis family. The mayor of New Orleans called him a teacher, a father, and an icon. Ellis Marsalis was 85. Mary and Wilford Kepler were married for more than 73 years. They went to the same high school in Wisconsin and wed in 1946. They had 3 children, 8 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. Because they both had coronavirus, they were able to stay in the same hospital room with their beds pushed together. They died within 6 hours of each other. Their family says in their final hours, they were able to hold hands and say I love you to each other one last time. Assistant school principal Joe Lewinger was a father of 3. In his final moments, doctors handed him his phone so his wife Maura could say goodbye.
Every single day my husband wrote me beautiful love letters in my lunchbox. Not just have a great day, but just beautiful letters about what I meant to him. I thanked him. And then I prayed, and then the doctor took the phone. And he said, I'm sorry, but there's no more pulse. And then I played our wedding song for him. And then that was it.
Our hearts go out to all of those families. Those who passed, now more than 100,000 Americans, may they rest in peace. May their memories be a blessing. Let's talk about this terrible milestone, 100,000 plus deaths here in the United States. Our chief medical correspondent, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, is still with us. Sanjay, it's hard to grasp. It's hard to grasp the enormity of this crisis here in the United States. Indeed, in so much of the world right now, in less than 3 months, more Americans have died than died in the Vietnam War, the Korean War, the other wars, the war in Iraq and Afghanistan combined.
Yeah, I mean, it is awful, Wolf, and that was a very moving story you just did at the end of the show there. I mean, it's just a reminder of these folks. And I've known people who have died of this disease, and I've seen patients very sick in the hospital. And I think that's really where I think a lot of the thoughts are probably right now. You think about 100,000. It's a terrible virus. It's a contagious virus, very contagious. It's very lethal, as we're learning. It affects certain segments of the population more than others, but we're still learning so much about this virus. I was reading today, Wolf, that 1 in 7 Americans will likely know someone who has died from this disease, something that we didn't even know 5-6 months ago. Really had never heard of before that. So it is pretty stunning. I will say, and I know you have Dr. Jeffrey Shaman here as well. There are lessons to be learned here, and there are lessons that can be applied quickly here, I think, because as tragic as this is, the virus is still out there. And so you have to decide at this point, are you going to look in the rearview mirror or forward? And I think right now we have to look forward. There'll be plenty of time to look at what went right, what went wrong. But there are lessons that we need to apply, I think, right now, Wolf, in terms of how we go forward.
And I think, and let me bring in Dr. Jeffrey Shaman, a professor and epidemiologist at Columbia University in New York. Dr. Shaman, there's so much of this coronavirus that even the greatest experts in the world, like Dr. Fauci, for example, that they acknowledge themselves. They have a lot more to learn about it.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, this is some new entity. It's a new virus that's dropped in our midst, and we're still scrambling to fully understand it, to understand what kind of long-term implications infections have. Obviously, there's this new pediatric inflammatory syndrome that's been identified that occurs in a minority of infections in children. There are other long-term consequences that we don't see. We don't understand the epidemiological characteristics of it. We don't know if the virus is seasonal, in that it will be less transmissible in July and August, and then be more transmissible again come wintertime. These are things that really have important ramifications for how we control the virus on a patient-by-patient level, how we treat people, and how we prepare for it as a society and in our public health interventions.
Let me bring in our chief White House correspondent, Jim Acosta, who's also monitoring this horrific moment in American history right now. More than 100,000 Americans have died from the coronavirus in less than 3 months. The president was down, Jim, in Florida. Unfortunately, they had to cancel, they had to postpone the space shuttle taking off. But tell us a little bit about what he's saying and what he's doing now.
Well, Wolf, he was not asked about the U.S. approaching this milestone of 100,000 deaths earlier this afternoon, when we were still not officially at 100,000 deaths. But he's on his way back to the White House right now from Florida after that scrubbed lunch, and he'll have an opportunity to talk to reporters as he arrives back on the South Lawn in about half an hour to an hour from now. So we'll wait and see if the president has anything to say. He hasn't tweeted about reaching this awful milestone, and he hasn't really talked about it in recent days. And so one of the things that we'll be watching for, obviously, Wolf, is just how he responds to this. He has not shown at all times the ability to express empathy to what's happened, this terrible, terrible toll that has been inflicted on the American people over the last 3 months. We do know, Wolf, if you just look back at how the president has handled this and responded to this over the last several months, he has had some terrible missteps along the way. That's not opining on anything. He just has. From the very beginning, when he downplayed the virus over and over again, the moments when he seemed to embrace Chinese President Xi Jinping and defend their handling of the coronavirus, later on becoming a critic of China's handling of the coronavirus, to his very strange embrace of the malaria drug hydroxychloroquine as a treatment for the coronavirus. We heard Dr. Anthony Fauci earlier today saying it's just not an effective treatment for the coronavirus. At one point, we all remember the president speculating about the possibility of injecting people with disinfectants as a way to cure the coronavirus. And so he has had, throughout all of this, misstep after misstep. In addition to that, the administration has struggled to get a grip on this virus, on this pandemic, slowly rolling out testing, slowly rolling out personal protective equipment, and so on. And so it is going to be one of these, I think, metrics that voters are going to be judging this president by come November, because you were just talking about comparing this virus and this pandemic to the death toll from Vietnam and the Iraq War and other wars, the war in Afghanistan and so on. The president has described himself throughout this crisis as a wartime president, and it is difficult, I think, for the president to declare he's won this war when the United States stands at 100,000 deaths. And my guess is, Wolf, is we'll get a chance to ask the president questions about all this, perhaps not tonight, perhaps it'll have to wait till tomorrow. But you know, Wolf, from covering the White House, this is one of those moments where the president of the United States really just has to comment on something terrible that has happened to the American people and reflect on it. The president hasn't always been very good at that, but he'll have the opportunity to do it, I suspect, in short order. Whether or not he takes that opportunity this evening, that's what we'll be watching for in the next several minutes.